Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of Not D&D, which is brought to you by EN World Live, which is part of EN World, the leading tabletop news and review site. I'm your host, Jessica, as always, and this week we have with us the team behind 13th Moon Games. I'm very excited to talk about your game, Coven and Crucible. Get the beautiful graphic we have there on. So very excited to talk about this game, which is now currently live on Kickstarter. So if you have any questions about the game, jump in and ask, and we'll talk about them with the creators right here. But before we jump in, thank you so much for coming on, folks. Could you introduce yourself and say what you've done to kind of create this game?
Hi, I'm Roach. I am in charge of the setting and the world building portion of the game. I'm a writer. I am a practicing witch and pagan, so I have several books on witchcraft and paganism that have been published by Llewellyn, and so I bring that kind of my understanding of magic to the system that we have in the game, and that's kind of what I do.
Yeah, that's your main part of it.
That's my main focus. Yeah. That and I'm the one who's behind running the scenes behind for the Kickstarter.
Fantastic, excellent.
And just me, I'm Stefan, Bald Beastie. I do the mechanics. I've been a lifelong gamer since I was 9, so it's 43 years. But I've been doing the mechanics for this, and it's gone through a few renditions, but it's been a journey of love.
It's been a journey of love. Well, that's wonderful to hear. And we're going to talk all about that journey today and talk about the game. I have popped the link to the Kickstarter in the show notes if you're listening to the podcast, or in the comments if you're watching it live, so you can check out the Kickstarter there. And it's got like 4 days left. Is that correct?
Yep. It ends on Friday.
Ends on Friday.
Yeah, that's the night that we have our playtest, so it's going to be a very exciting night.
It will be an exciting night. So that's Friday the 27th of January. So you have this week to get involved now if you'd like to. And ask any questions now if you have any, if you'd like to hear whilst it's still live. So first of all, congratulations on the Kickstarter, because you are fully funded. You have gone through all of the stretch goals that I can see on there, which is incredibly exciting. But I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. Before I jump into talking about the game and talking about the Kickstarter, I'd like to talk about you lovely folks a bit first. So I always ask guests about kind of their background with RPGs and games, because I know LARP is a really big part of your story as well. So happy to talk about that. So Roach, what was the first kind of tabletop game you remember playing?
The first game I played was Rifts.
Okay.
It was, I didn't get into role-playing games until I went off to college, because I grew up in a small town in the middle of Wyoming, and there just weren't, that I knew of, there weren't, I didn't even know that RPGs and D&D and all that existed until I went off to college, and one of my friends was playing. She's like, I'm going to go play tonight. And I'm like, what is that? And so she starts explaining it to me. I'm like, yes, I'm in. Yes, I would like to try this. Yeah, immediately.
Fantastic.
Yeah, that was and Rifts was my introduction into RPGs and all of that.
And then that gatewayed into you playing LARPs and things as well?
LARP came much later. LARP came, I was at a point in my life where I was just very unhappy, and I went to a friend of mine. We had been coworkers, and I went to her and I said, I'm really unhappy and I don't know what to do. And my friend said, well, why don't you come LARP with us? Because it'll either make things better or worse. And I'm like, well, 50-50 odds. You can't really beat that. And so I went. I had never heard of LARP before, and and they were like, well, it's, you've played RPGs before. It's RPG, except for you get to wear the costuming stuff. And as soon as she said costuming, I'm like, I'm there. Yes. So that has been a big part of my RPG role-playing journey, is once I realized, oh, you can like dress up and everything. That was like hit all of my interests.
I think they really do go hand in hand. I've just come, literally this morning, came back from a convention where we were doing role-playing games, and we also had some LARP in there as well. So I think they go really hand in hand nicely and do different styles of games and stuff. So it's nice to see
yeah.
involved in both. But Stefan, moving over to you. So I'm going to ask you the same question. So what was your kind of first introduction to gaming, to playing role-playing games?
It was a birthday party in the basement of my friend's house when I was 9 years old. And they had like an Atari 2600 set up, just to date myself, a little video. That was like one of the first video game consoles. And then, but nobody was playing it. And they were out of this big table set up, and it was, I saw this screen, and I'm like, what's this? And he's like, oh, have you not heard of D&D? And I'm like, no. He's like, oh, come on, sit down. And it was, I remember the screen, I still remember to this day, it was Castle Amber from the AD&D module. And we started, and I don't think I've slept until like 3 or 4 in the morning. It was amazing. I was so excited. It was so much fun. And that's what got me started. And then from there, I've been doing it off and on all my life.
Fantastic. So yeah, it sounds like it had a big impact then as well.
Yeah.
And LARP is also an important part of your story, not just for you, but for the two of you as well. Could you share that story?
I could share that story. This is an amazing story, one of my favorites. So I was at the time, it was 2008, right? And I was in Michigan, and my friends, I was supposed to go to some national convention for this LARP organization I was part of. And in October, I couldn't go because my house was broken into. So then I stayed. But then I'm like, well, I'll go to this regional event in January. It was in Bettendorf, Iowa. And I go to this event, and I went with my friends, and I didn't know many people there. I had met a few people from before, from other events. And I went to the first night after party, and that's where I met Roach, and we hit it off, and it went from there. I mean, there's other details too that I don't know if we can share, but I will.
No, that's fine. But then you became a couple, and then started playing games together, and are now kind of creating games together. And so you've both worked on kind of Coven Crucible, like sharing the mechanical building and also the world building and generating it, which is lovely. So yeah, when I read that in the Kickstarter, I thought that's a nice story. So it's just a nice thing to kind of share. So thank you for sharing that with us. So kind of moving on now, I'm going to get us to talk about talk about the Kickstarter, and how did you go from people that just played games to people that kind of design and create them? What was that step like?
I'll let you tell the introduction. It was amazing.
Okay. Well, last year around Thanksgiving, I had this idea for a little while, but Stefan is a forever GM. He is always the one running games, and he rarely ever gets to play games. And we had run a very brief Changeling game together online. This was during the height of COVID here in the United States. And so we were running it online with friends, and it was fun. It was great for us to play together and to be co-GMs and co-storytellers, but it wasn't really scratching that itch of his to play. And I thought, well, I would like to run a game so that he could play, but I wasn't confident enough in my storytelling skills with different systems. And then I thought, well, what if we just made up a game? And so I went to him a little bit before Thanksgiving of last year, that was in November, and I said, well, hey, do you want to take our relationship to the next level? And he immediately said yes before I said anything else. And I'm like, I want to write an RPG game with you. And he's like, yes, let's do this. But the impetus behind it was we'd make a game that I could then run that he could play in. And so he wouldn't, and I would be comfortable running the game because I knew it inside out, which is totally not true, because I'm constantly asking him mechanics questions these days where I'm like, so this does this, right? And he's like, yes, it does.
But the setting and the world, you've got that down, I assume.
Yes, that I'm good on. It's just, when there's combat and I have to ask him questions like, okay, so if you block it, it does this, right? And he's like, yes, that's how we wrote it. Okay.
Of course we did, of course. So Stefan, for you, this was just a way to stop running and be able to play a game for once, it sounds like.
Yeah, it was in a I was excited about it first off, just because I love playing, but also because it was when we had discussed, the setting, and she had brought up this idea, and it's like this amalgamation of like two different movies that we love. I was like, okay, yes, I really want to play this game. And so
Fantastic.
that's where it came from.
Amazing. So Roach, as you came up with the idea kind of for the setting and built a lot of that, could you introduce us to it? So tell us about Coven and Crucible.
Yeah, so like the elevator pitch is, it's like John Wick meets The Last Witch Hunter.
Wow.
The longer the paragraph pitch is, it is a modern day world in which there are witches, and which magic is real, and people who practice magic are witches. It's not a hidden thing. You can go down to your local corner tarot shop, and there's a witch there that will do some divination for you. You can pick up potions from apothecary. It's like programming, where anybody could do it, but you have to put in the work to do it, and a lot of people don't.
It's like a really high kind of skill, specialized.
Yeah. And the idea is that our core book that we're running the Kickstarter for is set in Chicago, and it's basically you play a witch in Chicago who you specialize. So we have a lot of influences of the kind of idea that you're going to build a team. So you have the person who is the combat witch, you have the person who's the healing witch, the person who is the techno witch, and they come together, and that way people don't feel like they have to do everything, and it allows them to build teams, kind of like building a party, but with witches.
Fantastic. That sounds great. And the inspiration, is it right to say that's inspired by your own kind of spiritual practice and beliefs as well?
Yeah. A lot of it is based on my understanding and my belief in how magic works. It just made sense to me to draw from, this was going to be like a real world sort of thing, to draw from my own experiences.
Fantastic. So it's good to know that the setting's being made with like empathy to people that have kind of, spiritual practice and beliefs with like paganism or things like that. So it's been made by somebody who's understands that and is part of that kind of world.
We have really tried to write the setting in such a way that it is we don't engage in cultural appropriation. We don't get involved with making any kind of value judgments on whether or not practices or beliefs are real or not. We want this, it's a fantasy game, but it has some basis, some real world basis. So we want that. We don't want people thinking that, coming away from it thinking, oh, well, they're saying that witches are bad or witches are good or anything like that.
They're just people.
Yeah.
and they can do good things, like people, like you say, coding as the example. Yeah, someone that codes can do good or bad with it. It depends.
Yeah.
You could hack somebody, or you could build a really cool website, I guess. So I guess it's the same concept. That's really awesome to hear. So you mentioned kind of some of the film inspiration and other references. So how did you, Stefan, kind of go about making that mechanically work? So you had this awesome kind of setting idea. How did you approach, the game design of it?
Well, that's excellent, because to kind of springboard off of the whole idea of witchcraft and paganism and the idea of the personal relationship with magic, it requires a lot of intention, which is what the mechanics are based off of that. You have, because they're so diverse and it's pretty open-ended, which we'll get into in a minute.
Mhm.
It is it requires a lot of specific intention, like what is it that you want to accomplish, and then here's how you do that. But as far as how to get that John Wick grit coupled with that Last Witch Hunter mysticism and
Mhm.
just really cool vibe, it went through a lot of renditions. We
Mhm.
had to come up with an idea that wasn't that was it was as threatening as it was useful.
Mhm.
So combat is scary, just like
Yeah.
in real life, and combat can be very quick and dirty, and that's where the mechanics inspiration came from. And I wanted to keep it simple, so that's how we kind of came up with um, our target number and level success system with the D12s.
Okay. Could you talk about kind of the D12 system a little bit
Oh,
more and
I could talk
mechanics and how
about
it
it
works?
all
Excellent.
day long, all day
That's
long.
great because that's
So
exactly what I've invited you here to do. So what a perfect match.
thank you. So yeah, the D12s, how it works, it's at the very base level is you have a target number that you've generated, and you have these two D12s, because
Mhm.
in my experience, the D12s have gotten so little love, and they just really
Mhm.
need some. There's nothing wrong with them. They're not scary. They're awesome. So,
Okay.
I wanted to come up with something that was easy to use, didn't
Mhm.
require a lot, and then so we come up with a target number, and you roll two D12 and try to get underneath that target number, and that's the very basic it.
Mhm.
Um, we can, once you get into levels of success,
Yeah.
and when you have oppositional rolls and environmental effects and things like that, that's where you start getting into a bit more. Well, what does it mean? I succeeded. Now, what
Mhm.
does that mean? Um, so, like, we have the very basic definition. Target number is whether or not you succeed.
Yeah.
Levels of success are just how well you succeed.
There we go. And I understand, is it right that 13, rolling a 13 has a significance in the game?
It does. It does. So, because there are some roles that are really easy, some witches who specialize. If you're a specialist, you're going to be
Mhm.
really good at what you do, so you're going to succeed most of the time. Um, but sometimes you're doing something that, even that you're good at, it's really, really difficult,
Mhm.
which is where the levels of difficulty come into play and the difficulty rating. So, um, if you happen to have a target number that is, say, 12, right? And you roll these 2d12s and you get an 11 and a 2. That's a 13.
Mhm.
13 signifies something important happens. Whether it's good or bad depends on whether you succeed or not. So if that target number
Okay.
of 12 and you roll a 13, that's like a critical failure. So
Right.
something bad will happen, and it's at the ST discretion, but generally we have a guideline of what would happen.
Mhm.
However, if your target number was to say an 18 and you roll that 13, that's a critical success. So something really awesome happens. Generally, your levels of success are doubled for that action, but it could be something else depending on what the ST and what the intention of the action was, and what the ST decides, and what would mesh well with the setting that they're portraying.
That sounds really cool. I love how you mentioned how combat is very deadly. Because for me, reading through about the game before I invited you to come on, it seems like magic in this world, and correct me if I'm wrong, is a little bit almost like electricity, in the sense that it's very powerful and can do a lot of things, but if you mess around with it and do it wrong, it can be very dangerous. So, in the same way, because I'm not a trained electrician, I'm not going to try and mess with things in my house. Is that kind of how magic is in this world as well? Is that fair?
Yeah, it is. The concept is that anybody can do it, and that's
Mhm.
mechanically that is um, registered by the fact that everybody has a magic attribute.
Okay.
So, but certain, you know, depending on how high that attribute is and your
Mhm.
other skills that you get your target number, again, like Stefan said, it determines whether or not you succeed.
Mhm.
So, yeah, you can do some really nasty things with magic because we leave it really open ended. There aren't any like spell slots or
Mhm.
spell lists or anything like that. It's basically you say this is what I want to do, and then you
Okay.
look through your skills and see how you would accomplish that. And the fact that the way we have it set up, you could have the same, you could accomplish the same goal several different ways. So it's the difference between the difference between occult and lore. So they're both knowledge-based sub-skills, but they're going to have different flavors to them as to what you get from them. But the idea is, that it's if you screw up, that there could be, it could go anywhere from your spell fizzles to your spell backfires on you, and you get the brunt of whatever it was that you're trying to do. We try to leave it we want it very open-ended so that it's more storytelling as opposed to just rolling dice and consulting numbers on a sheet.
Sure.
We've been play testing for almost a year now, and there have been we've had a couple games where the entire time there was stuff going on where it wasn't, rolling was done, but it wasn't what the thrust of the storytelling was. We're both, again, having come from that LARP background and having a love for the storytelling aspect of various RPGs. That's kind of where our focus is oftentimes.
Sure. So it's leaning more towards being like a narrative storytelling game, so you can have that flexibility that you kind of talked about. Fab. So that sounds very approachable for a player, because you don't have to come in and learn all this massive rule set and this whole thing. And I assume, I'm going to ask Roach because it was intended for you to run something. Does it feel approachable as a GM as well, as somebody that's new to running games?
We try to make it so that we have a very clear outline of here are the mechanics, and we make them as clear as we can, but with the caveat of, okay, here's where ST or player intention comes in, or how they interpret how these go. My big thing when I was coming at this was, I know in my head what I want stuff to do. I don't know how to express that mechanically. So, because I want there to be consistency, because if you don't have a consistent rule set that everybody's agreed on, then it just kind of devolves into anarchy. And so that's when I was, that was where Stefan just was so helpful, and just he's a genius when it comes to mechanics, and I say that and I say that with a little bit of bias, just because I know nothing about mechanics, so I'm just super impressed. But he has really taken the time to come up with mechanics that even I can understand. And so I think that makes it approachable. I mean, again, I constantly have to ask him, so this mechanic does this, right? And he's like, yes, just like I wrote in the book. And then I go back and I read it. I'm like, yeah, if I had just read and not been lazy and just went to you instead.
But that's the great thing about playing on a table, I think. There's so many games I play because I love running the show. You can imagine I love trying different systems and new stuff, and sometimes part of that is just there's one person on the table that kind of knows the rules, so you're like, exactly what you said, I want to do this, how do I do that mechanically? And someone goes, you just do this, and you're like, okay, great. So I think that's how a lot of tables run. And I'm somebody that's played games for over a decade, but even some of those games I've been playing for that amount of time, I still don't know all the rules too. So I don't think you're alone in that experience, is what I was saying.
No, that's the benefit of the mechanics, to bounce off of that, because she was talked about how do I accomplish something, or how do I do this, and we've described there's more than one formula in order to accomplish the same task. So you can so as an ST, the ST, you say, okay, well, I want you to say, I want to cast a spell that makes me protection against fire. So the ST says, okay, well then give me magic plus magical plus warding. Okay, well, my warding isn't great, but how about magic plus magical plus endurance? Because I'm kind of enduring it. I'm like, okay, well, that would be good too. You could use that as well. It depends on what your intention is. So you can accomplish the same thing mechanically, even though it may not story-driven wise may not be the exact same thing. Whereas a warding would keep the fire from ever getting close to you, where endurance would the fire would hit you but not hurt you or something like that. So that's when we say open-ended, that's really what we mean is and it's a discussion between you and your ST, and it creates this, I find it creates this connection, because it makes people say, you know what, I designed this character this way, can I use this subskill? And when they can, they feel elated, like, yes, I made this character and I get to accomplish something that I'm good at. And it's a really good feeling, and it helps establish this really great dynamic between STs and players. And at least that's what we've experienced so far in the last almost year of playtesting, Wednesday and Friday nights.
All right, is that something people can join in on if they're interested? Or
we plan on running a couple tables once the Kickstarter is over. We do have a Discord channel that we've made for the official that will then be able to allow people, so that way, if people are like, I've got this game, I don't know how to play it, or I don't have a group to play with, that they will be able to come online on Discord, and we're going to be running a couple tables for that. That's been actually a pretty popular add-on for the Kickstarters, people getting in on the Discord access.
Fab. And so the best place to get that Discord link is on the Kickstarter page, is it?
Yes.
Fab.
Yeah.
Okay. Links for that are in the show notes or in the chat if you're watching live. So speaking about the kind of mechanics of the game a bit, and we talked a bit about characters and attributes and things like that, but could you walk us through character design? So how do you build a character? What makes up one of these, specialized magic users that you make in the game?
You can, it's what's great about it is, and I'll get there, you could be, say, a witch who likes technology, or you can be a hacker who casts a few spells, who maybe doesn't have the level of training as a more traditional witch, but has the natural ability to do so. So what you do is, character creation, you have 4 attributes, which is will, agility, body, agility, and magic. Wabam, if you would. And then,
oh, that's brilliant. Sorry.
That's why I created the acronym just specifically. And I said that to Roach. That's why I made it that way. Like, so it's easy to remember. And I already even screwed it up. But anyway, and then you have skills. And there are 9 skills, which cover a really broad range. And skills are things like academics, magic, strategic, technical, martial, athletics. So things like that just cover broad categories. And those are going to be your broad knowledges. And then underneath each skill, there are 9 sub-skills. So that's a total of, there's 7 sub-skills. So a total of 63 63 total sub-skills, which is a lot. And it seems like a lot. That seems confusing. But when you think about it, the sub-skills aren't, they are specializations within that skill. So you'll see in martial, you'll see things like melee, ranged, dodge, stuff like that. In magic, you're going to see things like alchemy, divination, warding, hexing, stuff like that. So when you start as a blank sheet, you see this blank character sheet, you have, okay, I have these 4 attributes. What do I do? All right, well, each one of them starts at a certain level, and then you get so many levels to add to that. And then same thing with skills. Skills all start at a certain level, and then you have so many levels to add to that. And then sub-skills. Well, sub-skills are those specializations. Those are the things that are going to tell you how many levels of success you're going to get. So you're going to want to pick a few of those and really do well. And put a lot of levels in those, so that you can say, I want to make a thief, witch, or a witch who steals things, steals artifacts. And so you can say, well, what skills and sub-skills would I really, really focus on? And you put your levels into those. It's not going to be really easy you could make a broad character, but you don't have enough levels at character creation to put levels in everything. And that's not the intention.
Yeah.
The intention is to come up with somebody really, really good at certain things.
And the game was created with that in mind. I mean, the whole idea is to get people to make a team. And that then encourages them to cooperate, to work together. I mean, you can have situations where characters will work against each other, or
Mm-hmm.
it's broad enough that you could have, like, you could play the political game and everybody has their own little spheres of influence where they're fighting against each other for that, or maneuvering against each other. But the idea is that, and there's a really good, Stefan has written a good explanation in the core book about how to create a specialized character, but you're basically just picking 2 or 3, usually just 2 of those skills, and then drilling down in those sub skills. And that's what so it allows you, it's a wide range of choices, but once you go, okay, here's my character concept, how do I pick things that will support that character concept, as opposed to, I'm going to min max and I'm going to make this martial character who can and do all this other stuff, and now I have to kind of cobble my character around that.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Like, you're making a really specialized character that you're like, I do this and this is my role, and it encourages you to, like you say, be a collaborative team. And it sounds like with like the scenarios and kind of stories you're telling, you're going to be presented with a puzzle, an obstacle, a situation, and it's up to the players to kind of work together to find a creative solution. Because, like you say, it's magic. There's like, what do you want to do? There's anything, and you could twist it and use it in so many different ways. So that's the kind of impression I'm getting from those kind of the stories that you tell. We've had a question about the setting. So it's based in kind of Chicago, and I'm wondering, have you got a kind of folklore or legends or details about Chicago and the history of that in the game? I think, because Roach, was it you have a connection and a background in Chicago? Is that right?
Well, we lived in the Chicagoland area I've lived in there for 20 some odd years. And yeah, for the setting, we've got various landmarks and neighborhoods that have certain paranormal or occult ties. One of the big things in the setting is a thing called genus loci, which are spirits of the place. And these are just spirits that characters can interact with that are kind of guardians of a certain space. So, it could be Lake Michigan, or something as small as a community garden. And I really tried to bring in landmarks and neighborhoods, and tried to bring that Chicago feel into this setting. I tried to approach it as if kind of like a fantasy setting, where you have a fantasy setting and nobody knows anything about this city that you're coming to. You need to be able to describe it in such a way that they can immerse themselves into it. So that's how I approached doing this setting for Chicago. Is, okay, I'm coming at it as if I were an alien and had never been here before. What are the important things that I would need to know in order to feel like I'm in this setting?
Sure. And I think you can see it influenced in the artwork as well. And I'd love to talk about the artwork of the game a little bit as well, because this image we have here is stunning, and there's some glimpses of like kind of concept artwork and things that you got on the Kickstarter page. And I saw that one of your stretch goals was about kind of more art and things. So I'd love to talk about the visuals of the game.
Oh yeah. So our artist is actually our daughter, Charlotte. She's taking a gap year. She graduated high school last year, and she's taking a gap year before she goes to school for astrophysicist.
Oh wow.
Astrophysics. Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
And she has been doing all of the art. I will cultivate or curate a bunch of source images, royalty stock images, that I then show to her, and I go, okay, this is kind of what I'm looking at, and then she makes the art of it. And yeah, it's amazing. The book is going to be so flippin' pretty, just with all of the wonderful illustrations that she has done for it so far. And what I've posted to the Kickstarter is like a quarter of what we've got, and then we're going to have even more now because we hit that stretch goal.
Perfect. So yeah, and that's wonderful. I mean, I can't believe she's also an astrophysicist and just also an incredibly talented artist. Like, what a combination! What a combination!
She writes fan fiction. She is all hitting all the different topics there. But no, she is great, and I am super proud of the work that she's done.
For sure, definitely. Well, so we kind of talked about the setting and the world. We've talked, a bit about the mechanics, how you create a character, the art, and things like that. But I'm wondering about what are the stories that people tell? Like, in the Kickstarter, are there kind of scenarios for people to play through, and if you have any kind of examples from playtesting about the kind of the kind of games people will be playing when they're playing Coven and Crucible.
Oh, well, so I can talk about this a little bit. I'm excited because
Sure.
I've gotten to play for the last year, which is amazing.
Yeah, as the forever GM getting to go
right,
to the table
it's
as a
great.
player.
So excited.
Yeah.
So it presents, the scenarios are presented with the idea of some magical influence. Sometimes it's magical, sometimes it's not. But how you react to it is going to be how things progress, obviously. So, for instance, one of the topics that happened for this was hunters. There's an organization that just doesn't, they don't like witches, and so they kind of hunt them down, and so that's a bit scary, and how you resolve those situations, both morally and legally, could indicate that character's arc and future, or how a character is treated by the public could then indicate how this character gets, how this arc goes. I had a character that was kind of oscillating on a, well, he could be a good guy, he could be a white hat, or he could become, this could be his villain arc, and it just kind of balanced so finally. Then he finally fell on the side of the white hat, and it became a really cool thing. But yeah, so there's scenarios that involve there's scenarios that involve things like magical witch bars. There are scenarios that involve magical creatures, supernatural creatures, shifters, things like that. So magical tattoo artists, which is awesome. That's a trait.
That is cool. Yeah.
That's a thing I didn't mention much about in the mechanics yet, because the skeleton is the attribute, skill, subskill, but then you have the flesh and muscle, which are the traits of the character. But
okay.
in any case, yeah, it's the scenarios are really what you make it. Since and Roach is the setting about the legality of witchcraft, and is it legal, and how does it happen, and how does the legal system handle this, and how does the IRS handle vampires?
Yeah, what is the situation on that, Roach? Because I was just wondering, as you were saying that, Stefan, what is how does it interact? Because if it's a real world thing, then it would have laws and regulations, and
there is a whole section on there on how the law, specifically within the United States, deals with magic, and it's the answer really is, it's complicated. Where you'll have some places, especially with like the United States, where it's a different states will have different laws and the like. You'll have some places where they will have they'll have a in their police station, they'll have a witch department that deals with magical crime, and other places where they don't. Legally speaking, there aren't a lot of laws governing governing witchcraft, mostly because within this world setting, because it's based on real world, witches went through the whole burning times happened, where you had a couple centuries of people being hung or burned for being witches. So there's this enormous pushback on the witch community against any kind of legislation about legislating witchcraft, because of the fear of it going back to where it could be, you end up being thrown in jail for being a witch. But kind of piggybacking off of what Stefan said, and the question of like what kind of scenarios and what kind of stories are being told, we have run the gamut from hilarious, like Benny Hill-esque shenanigans to just very moving stories of character development, and the number of times that the players have adopted an NPC, and
every
and now and now I've got like a half dozen NPCs that I have to keep track of because they have been adopted and they could come up at any time. But yeah, it runs a whole, the setting allows for either you can have a heist, like we've run heists, we've run the fights with witch hunters. There was one game where it was basically a episode of Law and Order where it was there's this night court that is talking about the legalities. There's a separate court that was set up by supernatural entities, so vampires and shifters and whatnot, to deal with their legal issues. So if you were a werewolf and you had a problem with a vampire, rather than, you wouldn't go to a mundane court, you went to this night court. And so we had a whole game where players, their characters had to deal with that kind of supernatural legal system. I've been really pleased with the range of tones that we can strike with the material that we have, and that really has been a lot of that has, what's the saying, that the ST can decide whether the game is going to be a heist or not, but it's the players who decide whether it's going to be Benny Hill music or epic music for the background. That is absolutely what has happened here with, we have just been really lucky with our play testers and with being able to hit all of those different keynotes.
Yeah, definitely. I think, like in any game, it so depends on the mood the players are in at that moment, and you can have so many different tones and genres to a game. So it's great to see that it has the flexibility of that.
There was that the one game. I'm sorry, I'm so excited about this one. We all got, our witches got trapped in this supernatural space, and so we all had to play our familiars, which is really cool.
Oh, how do familiars work in the games? Everybody loves a pet.
Familiars they aid in the witch's magic, and they can have their own skills and sub skills, so they can do their own thing. So you could have a familiar who's martial, you can have a familiar who is sneaky and does spy stuff for you, and so there was just one game where I was like, all right, all your characters, put your character sheets away, bring out your character sheets for your familiars, because that's who you're going to play tonight. And great. Because I love that. I was like, we've had a bunch of serious episodes, so let's have a fun one. But familiars, and then there's also another trait, which is servitors, which are magical servants, basically, that witches can create to do things for them. So if you are not a martially inclined witch, you could have a servitor that acts as a bodyguard. Or if you're, if you're a hacker witch, you can have servitors that help you in hacking, that sort of thing.
Fantastic. I love that thing about the familiars. I'm so glad I asked about that. Because I think all role players, they end up, even if there's no mechanic for that, they end up adopting a pet or picking up something anyway. So it's nice to see that's kind of officially kind of in the game as the rules. We talked a lot about how this game was made. So Stefan, you could be a player, and so it seems like it's made very much in mind for somebody that's played games and is looking to be the storyteller, as you call the kind of the GM in this game. What sort of advice would you give to somebody? Well, and when I'm saying somebody, I mean me, because I'm recently starting to kind of run games, and from being a player for a long time. So what kind of advice and guidance would you give to somebody running this game for the first time?
Trust that no matter how badly you think you might be doing, you're doing an awesome job. Most often, players are just happy to be there and happy that they're running a game. I was super nervous, and I still get nervous oftentimes because I want everybody to have a good time. So I spend a lot of time like, are they having a good time?
Yeah.
I've kind of gotten better at that. But honestly, as long as you are providing, you can give your players a whole lot of leeway. Oftentimes, you can just sit back and let them RP, and they'll just RP and occasionally come to you and be like, I want to do a thing. And that's when you jump in. But yeah, giving your players leverage and just kind of not trying to not trying to insert yourself too much is a good way to get that confidence that you need for running games.
Awesome.
If I can jump in mechanically for the
please
new
do.
ST,
Yeah.
no, I think the best thing that you can do is understand that is just trust that you may never ever know the mechanics as well as you would like, but that doesn't matter because you get to have a conversation with the player as far as what the role is. Like, okay, I want to hex that witch over there to sleep. Okay, well, you could do this, or I want to turn invisible. Is there an invisibility spell? And you may say, okay, well, I don't know. It's not in the rules. Is it in the rules? And there is, but if they come up with something really odd, like I want to turn that entire SUV into liquid silver. Okay, well, because it's holding a bunch of were creatures or shifters. So okay. Then what would you do? There's nothing really explaining that. So there's that. You get that little bit of tension, like I don't know what I'm supposed to do. You look at the character will look at the sheet, and the ST can always say, well, what do you think would be a good formula for that? The formula being attribute skill plus sub skill. And so you can look at it and say, well, maybe it's magic plus magical plus occult. I don't know. Or how about magic plus magical plus science, or magic plus magical plus mechanics, or something like that. Just anything along those lines. Just something that you might, and understanding that what you say today as far as a formula may not be the same thing as tomorrow, because in the moment it's easy to get lost when you're looking at mechanics, not knowing what to do. So trust in the fact that you have a good relationship with your players, and the players will oftentimes come up with stuff that you had not even dreamed of, and it may be a formula that works, and it works awesome. So
that does sound great. I love the sound of that. As we've mentioned previously, Coven and Crucible is live now, currently on Kickstarter. It is fully funded. All the stretch goals have been met, so it is happening, and it has 4 days left, and it closes this Friday. So if you are interested, have a click through and support if you're able to, because the best way to support indie tabletop RPG creators is to buy their stuff. So congratulations to both of you on the Kickstarter.
Thank you.
Wanted to come and talk to you about Kickstarter because this is the second time you've gone to kind of kickstart this game, and this second time it's been very successful and done well. So I wanted to know if you had any kind of advice or guidance for other creators that are looking to kind of get their game out there and perhaps do crowdfunding.
Yeah, I think our biggest mistake with the first one, which did not fund, was we put too high of a goal, and we didn't have a fully finished product yet. And I think that there's often, because you'll see all of these really successful Kickstarters that are bringing in all this money, and all of a sudden you're like, well, I guess I should shoot for a high goal, because if I do a smaller goal, people might think that I don't have confidence in myself, or they might think that I'm not take me seriously. And after talking with a bunch of people who have a bunch of friends who have backed a lot of different Kickstarters, so they were like, no, you want to start small, and you want to have a finished product, and you want to have very reasonable goals. Over promise or under promise and over deliver.
Yeah.
And that's where I think one of the reasons why we did so well this second time around was because we had a much more reasonable goal in mind, and we were like, no, we're done. We've got the book finished. We just, now we just need our audience to show up. So here is our weird game. And all you weird witches should come and play it. But that was, I think that's the biggest thing, is just make sure that you have a very reasonable goal in mind, and that the product is finished. So that so that you're reducing the risk on the end of your backers, so they're not taking as big of a risk.
Sure.
Springboarding off of that, having a finished product and then playtest, and trust your playtesters and ask for input. We've added traits that were recommended by the playtesters, or that were brought up by playtesters, like, this would be a really cool thing to have, and we're like, yeah, it would. Okay, and I write it down. There it goes. So trust your playtesters. And playtest.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I think playtesting is really good, one, for obviously making the game better mechanically and getting that feedback. But we've had somebody in the comments here, your playtesters become your fans and people that are going to buy the stuff. So it's almost like kind of marketing. We have someone here saying, as a playtester, I can say for anyone watching, the system is a ton of fun to play, and I'm excited for the greater worlds to get to play in it soon.
Thanks,
Googs. Love you.
So one of the backers there. So if you would like to become one of the backers, the links are in the show note if you're listening to the podcast, or the link is on the screen or in the comments if you're watching us live. So we are coming up to the top of the hour. It's been so wonderful to talk to you about Coven and Crucible. Sorry. I was so excited when I saw it on Kickstarter, and really glad to have kind of indie creators like yourselves coming on to share your game. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for having us.
Of course. Before you go, I do have one more question, though, that I ask everyone, which is, do you have any recommendations for other tabletop role-playing games that you would like to share with everyone else? And the rule is it can't be a game that you've made, and it can't be Dungeons and Dragons, because the show is called Not D&D.
I am a huge fan of Changeling, which is a White Wolf game, and that has always just been my game, my go-to game.
Fab.
Yeah,
love
same.
Yeah. We have some votes for Changeling then. Yeah,
I was going to say Changeling. I enjoyed Werewolf the Forsaken, only because they had a really interesting spirit-based realm or world. But it was, but I enjoyed that too, because it was just a really sad tale. But I enjoyed that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, that's some great recommendations there. So if you enjoy indie tabletop RPGs, you can check them out, and maybe they will appear as a guest on Not D&D in the future.
I'd love to. That'd be great. Because we didn't talk about the name of the game, Coven and Crucible. Those are two huge prominent things in the story that are featured. You'll get to learn about it if you get the book.
Absolutely. Yeah, the link to the Kickstarter is there, so go check that out there. There's still 4 days left, so you still have time to get involved. We're wrapping up here for Not D&D. Thank you everybody who's come to watch live, and thank you to the listeners supporting the show with the podcast. Next week we have another guest on. We're looking at Shadow of the Weird Wizard, which is nominated on EN World as one of the top 10 most anticipated tabletop RPGs to come out in 2023. Awesome. So if you want to ask any questions about that, or come on and just get more information about it, we'll be here same time, same place next week. But for now, we will leave you and say goodnight. Thank you very much.
Good night.
Bye.